All right, great. So, thank you all for those who are staying on to hear about the state side of the application process. So, my name is Michael Turner. I'm the Assistant Director of Grants and Loan Forgiveness Programs for New York State Higher Education Services Corporation, which is your state student aid agency that we administer tuition assistance program, TAP, the Excelsior Scholarship, Enhanced Tuition Award, and several different grant scholarship and loan forgiveness opportunities. So this portion of today's webinar is going to cover the process for those students who are New York residents who are looking to apply for New York State financial aid to attend college here in New York State. And the most common program that those students are typically applying for is TAP, the Tuition Assistance Program. So let's start with just a plug for our school counselor resource area. I know a lot of the folks who are listening in today are our school counselor partners, those who work in high schools and school districts, helping students through this process. I really want to recommend that you sign up for our school counselor newsletter to get all the latest news and updates related to pre-college and training and events and other opportunities that we have going on through New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. We have a wonderful FAFSA support initiative coming up with different sorts of training and different sorts of modules and things that are coming up soon. So all of these things that we want to promote. In order to be in the know, you definitely want to sign up for our newsletter. So if you would just go to hesc.ny.gov, you hover over where it says for academic partners, you'll see a breakout for high school counselors. And then the first thing that you see is this page here, encouraging you to sign up for our newsletter. So let's dive into the 25-26 TAP application. We expect the 25-26 TAP application is going to open on Sunday, December 1st. We know that the FAFSA has, I guess, fully opened at this point for the majority of applicants, but given the initial announcements from the U.S. Department of Education and the expectation that it was going to open on December 1st for full use, we aligned our launch of the 25-26 TAP application to that December 1st date. So even though the application now is in whatever they want to call it, beta 4, expanded full use, or I don't know, however they're labeling it, the TAP application still will be opening on Sunday the 1st. So if any students have already applied for FAFSA, or will be applying for FAFSA over the next week or so, they do have to wait for December 1st to then be able to apply for TAP. Again, all of our notifications will be in place. So if we are receiving FAFSA records, ISA records, indicating a student is a potential TAP applicant, then we'll be sending our email notifications and other kinds of prompts to get the student to come in and file their 25-26 TAP application. The application can be easily located on our website. We have a redesigned website with simpler navigation. The TAP application sits under the financial aid tab. They go to grants, and then there's TAP, and then there's this information page which explains all the eligibility requirements for TAP, the deadlines, and then a link to the application. In New York State, there's two different pathways to apply for tuition assistance. And the first is what I call the traditional pathway, which will be our focus for today's presentation, which will be for students who are typically our FAFSA filers, who meet the citizenship immigration status criteria to qualify for federal student aid. And then we'll be then applying through our traditional TAP application that we've had for many years. We also in New York State since 2019-20 have offered an alternative pathway through the Senator Jose Peralta New York State DREAM Act legislation that enables a broader variety of students of varying immigration statuses to be able to apply for New York State aid like TAP, Excelsior, and all our other programs, but via a separate pathway through a New York State DREAM Act application, which is a standalone process where FAFSA is not required. For time purposes, this session is only going to be focusing on the traditional application since it's paired with FAFSA. We'll be doing some additional trainings. We have a new New York State DREAM Act coordinator, Natasha Torres, who's been getting out there doing some trainings, and we're going to be doing some additional webinars talking more about the DREAM Act process, the application flow, and all of that, but it's just kind of too much to talk about given our time constraints with this specific webinar. So we'll be focusing on the traditional pathway. So again, our traditional pathway would be the standalone TAP application where students have completed a FAFSA and they're now looking to apply for TAP. The pathway would involve students being eligible for federal student aid. So again, citizens, eligible non-citizens who meet the criteria for federal student aid purposes. And the FAFSA will be required to process the TAP application. So while students may be able to apply for TAP at any time, the students will need to have a processed TAP application on file in order for us to then process their TAP application. So if the student's FAFSA is in flux because it's missing parent signatures or there's a number of processing issues, we've seen issues in the past with provisional dependent status where they're claiming they're independent and has to be authorized by the college. Those sort of, again, FAFSA statuses that are in flux that have not resulted in a fully processed FAFSA with an SAI calculated will not result in a TAP application being processed. So it's really, really important for us to emphasize that students should make sure that their FAFSA has been fully submitted and is processed with an SAI before proceeding to apply for TAP if they want to ensure the best outcome to get a fully processed TAP application. Now, in terms of what's new with the TAP application, you can see everything is sort of meeting our new color scheme and design. A lot of the content within the TAP application remains the same, but you can see a redesigned application launch page. Most folks are used to seeing that gold and white color scheme, and now we have this sort of teal and white color scheme going on that you'll be seeing in many of our screens. So here's the new launch page, giving some of the student the initial information. Again, recommending students to the DREAM Act if that's the flow that they're looking for, and a huge, nice yellow Start My Application button. So the student will click Start My Application, and the first thing that we're going to bring them through is to the login process, or if they're a first-time user, the account registration process. So if we're talking about continuing students who are applying, these students need to make sure that they have their HESC user IDs and PIN numbers from their previous application submissions, a year or two ago, depending on how long they've been in college, because this is the information they're going to need in order to renew their TAP application for the 25-26 year. If students have previously created HESC accounts, they should not be creating new HESC accounts if they can't access their old account information. We've seen that phenomena happen where students made an account 2 or 3 years ago. They don't remember it, so they just go ahead and click the link for first-time users, and they try to register a new account. The account is tied to their social. So if the student already has a pre-existing account based on their social security number, the only way for them to create a secondary account would be using a different social security number, 1 or 2 digits off. I usually call them bogus SSNs, or registering as a parent or some other person to create the new account. Again, students need to be using their own accounts to apply for TAP. So if they're a continuing returning student, they should be using the I forgot option to recover their accounts, not attempting to create new accounts, because it's really important that the account that they're using matches the information on their FAFSA. So students will, if they're first-time users, of course, they'll be creating a new account, agreeing to terms and conditions. The account creation process is pretty simple and straightforward. There's some terms and conditions that they're going to check the box and they're going to accept, and then they're going to move in to create their account, putting in their social security number, date of birth, name, address, and phone number information. What's important to know is that when students are creating their HESC accounts for the very first time, it's really, really important. I can't emphasize how important it is that the identifying information that they're providing when creating their account matches up to what they used to file their FAFSA. So if the student provides us a different social security number or even a different date of birth that does not correspond to their FAFSA application, our system is never going to match the TAP application that they submit using this account to that FAFSA because of a social or date of birth conflict. So it is really important that students know what their real social security number is. And we've been seeing just this increasing phenomena of students not knowing what their date of birth is. I had an inquiry from a college the other day asking, students where they filed the TAP application, and they did, but they created their HESC account with the date of birth with the year is 1999, but they filed their FAFSA with their date of birth year as 2002. And it's just, I'm scratching my head. I'm like, how does the student not know what year they were born? Now I could see, some disparities with, you know, uh, 2002, that they accidentally key in 2003 by accident, but 1999 is way different than 2002. So, typically, we just say they should just, I guess have their birth certificates and know what their date of births are. So that way they can make sure that they're using the right information on FAFSA that they're going to be using to create their HESC account and file for TAP. If they have a disparity between date of birth on the FAFSA and date of birth on the TAP account, then one of the two needs to be amended, right, to put the correct information. And it may result in them needing to refile their TAP application if they filed an entire TAP application with bogus identifying information. Also, what's important to know is that a parent cannot be filing an application using their account on behalf of their child. So if I'm creating this account and I'm Josh Hart and I'm actually the father of the student and I'm intending on creating this a HESC account for me, but then I'm intending on going into a TAP application and filling it out using my child's information, that's also not going to result in a processed TAP application. Only the student should be the initial account creator. They should be the ones providing their identifying information, creating the account, and then using that account to apply for TAP. Parents, unless they themselves are going to college, should not be using their account to apply for a student's TAP application. We've seen a number of that happening recently as well. So again, identity confirmation, there's an option for students to verify identity through the New York State DMV. That would be if they have a New York State ID that's issued by the DMV, which would be something like a driver's license, learner's permit, or non-driver's license ID. It's not required for them to go through this verification, but basically they, are permitted to try to verify this way. If not, they could use the skip option if they don't own one of these types of IDs to just bypass this. It's not required. Last year, we got a lot of questions from school counselors. Why are students being required to provide their New York State IDs? They're not. There's a skip button right here highlighted by the big click arrow that they could just bypass this and keep moving forward. If they skip the New York State DMV identity verification, we're going to base their identity verification on the FAFSA match, right? We're going to be looking for a FAFSA that has identity verified by the Social Security Administration, name, date of birth, Social Security number. That needs to match the HESC account for that account then to be considered verified. So moving forward, the student would then enter their email address. Second email is optional and a challenge question in case they need to, recover or reset their PIN. And then there's an option to enter a secondary contact if they would like. It's also optional, so they can skip it if they do not want to provide that information. Creating a user ID, it has to have letters and numbers. They should be aware of the rules that are indicated here. There's several rules about what's allowed to create user IDs, and you can see there's some prohibitions on special characters. There's prohibitions about creating accounts that contains, elements of their date of birth or social security number. So they just need to be aware of that. And once they have their ID created, again, they should be, logging that somewhere, making sure they have it for future use because you do need to reapply for TAP every year. Or they may need to log into their account to do some maintenance, like, provide a missing information document, check their status, and all of that's going to be tied to remembering that user ID. We do not have passwords on our accounts. We use PIN numbers. So it's basically a 4-digit secret code similar to what you would use on an ATM if you're pulling money out of a bank. So we ask students to create a PIN number that they'll use in tandem with their user ID in order to access their account. 4 digits, again, prohibitions against them using certain things for the PIN code, like they can't use their date of birth, they can't use elements that come from their social security number. Again, you can help the students figure out what PIN they'd like to use and then make sure that they log that, record that somewhere for future use. There's some optional email notifications that students can sign up for, New York State security events. Again, optional, they could accept or decline, and also to get HESC news and notifications. One thing that folks will see that's a little bit different this year is we do have this New York State organ donation registry option here. part of New York State legislation that was passed not too long ago to try to have state agencies give folks the opportunity to sign up as organ donors. Again, it's an optional thing. They can say yes, a new window would open up to sign up to become an organ donor. If not, they click no, and they would be allowed to then move forward with the application. So they're going to have an application year selection screen. It's going to default to 25, 26 for most users. So that's typically what we would expect most people to be applying for in the coming aid year. If they are a continuing student who forgot to apply for the 24, 25 application, that application is still open up until the end of June of 2025. So they could opt to select the 24, 25. It is important, though, we do get continuing students who are trying to file for this year and will be presented the option for 25, 26. They'll file next year's application and then tell their school that they did file the current year application. And then you contact us, we check and we tell you they didn't do 24, 25, they did 25, 26. So keep in mind there will be the two open application years up until the end of this coming June when we will close the 24, 25 application year and it'll only be 25, 26 up until the point where in 26, 27 opens. So there's some steps on information on completing the application and a affirmation that the student's gonna agree to by clicking the proceed button that we will be reviewing their application and sharing information with other New York State agencies to verify the answers that they're providing in their application, such as their income, which is verified with the New York State Department of Tax and Finance, or their foster care status. If the student is claiming they're a foster youth, we have a verification process with the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. So they're agreeing to these verification processes by proceeding to complete an application. One thing to note that I kind of bypassed earlier is that we have a very generous application window for our TAP application. It'll typically run from the opening time, whenever it opens in the fall, through the end of the academic year that they're seeking to receive aid for. So if I'm a high school senior who's trying to get into college for 25, 26, I'll have up until the end of June of 2026 to submit a 25, 26 TAP application. It's not this coming June because we will, and every year we get, and we'll get again this year, people who are panicking this coming June saying, oh, my high school seniors, they forgot to do their TAP application. Is the deadline this June? And we'll remind those folks who are panicking, it's not this June. They have until next June, 2026 to complete. So, nearly 2 years of an open application period for students to be able to apply. One thing to note, I wasn't able to get an updated screen for this, is some options that may come up on the TAP application where continuing students may receive errors about not having FAFSA applications on file, or also continuing students to renew scholarships. If we have a student who's a continuing student who has the Excelsior Scholarship, or has a STEM incentive, or has the Scholarship for Academic Excellence, the system will prompt them with the option to either file for TAP or file just for renewal of their scholarships. Filing for just renewal of scholarships, if they opt just to renew their scholarships, will present them a shorter application experience, but will only result in the renewal of a scholarship award and not provide enough of the application for them to be considered for TAP. For whatever reason, last year we had a number of continuing students who opted just to renew their scholarships and not fully apply for TAP. So we did advise our school partners about this issue, that they could just basically go back into the application and ask to file the full TAP application. But we did want to put that warning out there, and I will, when I get this handout out, try to get this screen updated with that option on there, so you could see what they're seeing and that they should be opting to complete the full TAP application. So once they enter into the application, they'll be brought to the first screen, which is a personal information page. This page will have basically the information that they use to create their account, and then they'll add some additional information to answer some questions about their residency, citizenship status. So one thing I want to note on here is that if you could see on the screen, the date of birth is locked in. So when I created this account as Josh Hart, I put my date of birth was January 1st, 2007. So that cannot be edited. That's locked in based on my account. If I were to proceed to fully submit this application with that date of birth, that better be the date of birth that matches my FAFSA. Because if my FAFSA says I was born on January 2nd, 2007, then this TAP application is not going to be processed because it will never match to my FAFSA that has January 2nd as my date of birth, whereas this TAP application I'm submitting has January 1st. So again, it's all locked into account creation. So we need to make sure that students are properly filling out their identity on their accounts, so that way that these applications they're submitting will result in successful processing. A couple things to call out here that result in common mistakes. New York State residency, we asked the student for the 25-26 cycle, did you live in New York State for all of the 2024 calendar year? Simple yes or no. If they moved, mid-year 2024, they could say no and enter a month and year. There will be prompts that will let them know that if they indicate that they don't have the year of living in New York State, that we will be looking to screen them for residency review. So the rule typically for TAP is that the student, and if they're dependent, their parents, must have lived in New York State for 1 or more year prior to the term that they're seeking to receive TAP for. So if I'm trying to get TAP for fall 2025, I need to have lived in New York for 1 year prior to that. And if I'm a dependent student, my parents should also. So if there is something that calls into question their New York State residency based on their responses on the TAP application, their responses on the FAFSA, HESC will bring them through a residency review process where they have to submit a residency affidavit or a residency questionnaire, where they give us some information, they let us know, and we will then manually review that and try to make an assessment as to whether they meet the requirements for residency. We really want to avoid unnecessary residency reviews because for application errors, we get a lot of longtime New York residents simply out of, careless errors like tabbing through the application, not reading, answering questions wrong, that will flag themselves for a residency review when it's not needed. Residency reviews, once they've been initiated, cannot be reversed. So we get a lot of questions from students, high schools, counselors, college partners. Oh, can we just, the student put that by mistake. Can we just go back and make them a New York resident? We can't do that. Once the residency review's been initiated, they have to fill out the questionnaire. We'll review it, see that they've been living in New York for their entire lives, and we'll then move them forward. So the goal is to answer the application correctly the first time to have to avoid these back-end reviews. Citizenship verification. So because this is the traditional application process where students are filing as FAFSA filers who meet Title IV citizenship requirements, U.S. citizens, eligible, and all the classes of eligible non-citizens, we do use the same verification process that colleges are required to use by looking at ISER response codes that will indicate to us whether or not a student has been verified as a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen through the SSA verification on the FAFSA. So the student will indicate on their TAP application whether they're a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, alien, and then we'll look at the corresponding ISER response codes that will tell us whether the Social Security Administration verified that this is a U.S. citizen, verified that they're an eligible non-citizen. If we have ISER FAFSA response codes that show us that their citizenship status is called into doubt, was not verified, then just like a college would be required to collect copies of U.S. passports, certificate of naturalization, permanent resident cards, I-94 documents, whatever it is that verify citizen or eligible non-citizen status, HESC will also be making a similar request to collect the same documentation. And yes, for continuing students, if they change their citizenship status, they may be pulled into this review, even if they were a prior TAP recipient, because they've come up with a flag that tells us that they're not using the appropriate status and that their status is unverified. So again, this will be a RFI issue. The student will have to provide us documentation that supports this, and we're fairly up to date with this. We clear these as we get them. Students would have an upload option. We'll talk about the upload portal and all of that later to send us their documentation. So following the personal information screen, students are going to be able to complete to tell us what college they're going to. One thing that's remarkably different between the TAP application and the FAFSA is that the FAFSA has, up to 20 different colleges that you can list on there for students who are undecided. Our TAP application is based on the one college that they expect to be attending in the 25-26 year. So students should not be entering multiple colleges on the screen because it's by term, summer, fall, winter, spring. And we do see some students, they'll list Columbia University for summer, City College for fall, Hunter College for winter, and then Fordham University for spring. So that to us looks like they're transferring from those four colleges from semester. It really needs to be one college. If the student's undecided, then we just simply say, well, what's your top choice in New York State? If all your colleges were to accept you, which one would you most likely want to go to? And that should be the college that you're listing on here. Again, New York State College can't be Harvard out of state. And if that college is not where they end up going, then we do have, I'll talk about later, an easy way of making college name changes on the application. But initially, this would be the college that I'm going to list. If this is the college that I don't want to go to at this time, it's not my top choice, then I could easily use the search button to change or add a college. The next screen is going to be entering their student ID number. On the student ID number is going to be the number assigned to the college that identifies the student that is not their social security number. For some students, they may have this upon initiating an admissions application. I know CUNY does that. They assign what they call the EMPL ID numbers as soon as students start filing an application for admission. Some colleges may not assign an ID number until a student is past being admitted to the college. Whether a student has the number or not, they can enter it. If they don't have it, they could simply check the button to bypass the requirement, and then they could move forward. Student marital status, very obvious. What is the student's marital status? Even though it's a very obvious question, we sometimes get very confusing answers. We have had to do application fixes for students who have married themselves to their mothers and fathers. Again, that's typically when a parent is filling out this application on behalf of the student. They'll see marital status, they'll associate with themselves, and then we end up getting daughters married to their fathers, sons married to their mothers, really type of odd looking things that we end up needing to have to fix. So again, a careful reading of the application will show that this is asking about the student's marital status. So if anyone like a parent is filling this out on behalf of the student, they should keep in mind that this question relates to the student and not the parent. And now we're asking questions about the student's dependency status. Dependency status will determine for us whether or not we're going to require parent information and income as part of the application and a part of the award determination. So in order to determine dependency status, we have, again, a different set of rules than the federal government regarding qualifying as a dependent or independent. Our primary screening is based on what we call financial independence status. Can a student claim that they are financially independent from their parents? And we'll look at the test that we put students through to see if they meet that standard. We also do those similar to the federal process, have certain special circumstances that are qualifiers automatically for independence, such as being a foster youth, ward of the court, or orphan on or after age 13. So if a student is trying to claim that they're independent from their parents, they should first indicate yes to that question that you see here. Are you claiming financial independence from your parents? Again, we do have students that will kind of, click next. They'll next their way through the application and not really read these questions. So if I'm a 40-year-old student and I just click next without reading or answering these questions correctly, I may be asked to provide parent info because I simply did not indicate that I am saying I'm financially independent from my parents. So again, a careful reading of the application, taking your time to go through and answer the bubbles correctly would save back-end stress of having to fix applications. We get a lot of call appointments, people saying, why are you asking for my mom and dad's information? I'm 45 years old. And we go back to the screen and we say, well, when you did a TAP application, you did not say that you were financially independent from your parents. So just keep that in mind. They do need to answer these questions appropriately. Now, if I indicate that I'm foster youth, it will give me this screen that allows me to get some information and get an application for something called the Foster Youth Success Initiative, College Success Initiative, the HESC funds application. This is not a HESC funded benefit for foster youth. It's a New York State Education Department funded benefit. But what we do is because we partner with them, we want to put the word out that these funds are available. So if the student indicates they're foster youth and they want to apply for this program, a separate window will open up with the application from the Office of Children and Family Services for them to be able to apply for this program to potentially receive those additional benefits. So it's basically just kind of putting it out there for them. Hey, in addition to applying for TAP, you can also apply for this additional benefit. And then they would go through that application process separately. If this is a non-foster youth, and they're trying to claim that they're independent from their parents, well, they'll be brought through our financial independence status test. So we're going to ask them these series of 6 questions that will ask them, for the current and coming year, will they be claimed as a dependent on a parent's tax return? Will they be living in their parents' apartment, house, or building? Will they be receiving gifts, loans, or other financial assistance worth more than $750 from their parents for the current and coming year? So again, traditionally dependent students, the answers to these questions would all be yes, right? If you're a parent, you claim your kids on your taxes, they live with you, and you provide them financial support, right? A lot of students will answer no to the gifts questions, seeing the word gifts and like, oh yeah, my parent never bought me a $750 gift. But it's not only saying gifts, it's saying financial assistance. So if you're paying, your child's food, housing costs, cell phone bill, whatever, it is more than $750 a year. So again, a typically dependent student would be answering yes. Now, if I'm an independent student that has a special circumstance where I'm not living with my parents, I'm not supported by my parents, then I should be answering all of these no, right? Let's say I live with my grandmother and my grandmother's my legal guardian. We're not asking about your grandmother on these questions. We're asking about the student's parents. So if the student's living with relatives due to special circumstances and wants to make a claim of independence, then they should be answering no to all these questions. Now, if I answer no to all these questions and I'm younger than 22 years old, the application is going to look to see if I have a qualifying special condition that will make me independent under the age of 22. If a student is 22 and older and they make these claims of being financially independent, our application gives them the benefit of the doubt. They treat them as an adult student and parent information will not be required, and neither is a special condition. So if I'm 30 years old, I said I am claiming financial independence from my parents, I don't live with them, they don't support me, they don't claim me, then I won't see the screen. I'll just simply be brought into my student income information without having to put anything about my parents. If I am a 18-year-old student who says the same thing, I'm financially independent from my parents, they don't support me, I don't live with them, so on and so forth, I will see this screen that's going to say, okay, you're 18 years old, why aren't you under your parents? So these are our special conditions. Parents being totally and permanently disabled or declared incompetent. So again, medical diagnosis. Foster youth, ward of the court orphan, on or after age 13. We spoke about that before. Students who receive public assistance under their own budget, not including food stamps, WIC, unemployment insurance. It has to be, we basically look for housing or cash assistance that's for the student. The student has to be the case holder, has to be their budget. And that's typically what we're looking for people claiming to receive public assistance. And then our sort of gray area of special circumstances, which, a lot of people will use, is what we call the involuntary dissolution of family. So something happened where the student's no longer in the traditional household situation with their parents, and that they have some kind of special circumstance that resolved in them no longer being under their parents' responsibility. So when students make a claim of any of these circumstances, they're going to see this follow-up screen that says we're going to allow you to proceed through the TAP application without providing parent info. However, you will hear from us when you submit your application with a request to get that documentation that supports your claim of special conditions. So when there is a claim of special conditions, we look for similar types of supporting documentation that students may be providing colleges to request a dependency override, right? Ward of the court documentation, legal guardianship court paperwork, third-party letters, which could be from a school counselor, social worker, stuff like that. Students would be able to upload it through their HESC account, and then we would review it and see if it meets our standards to qualify the student for independence. We just want to make sure, sometimes schools are accepting certain types of documentations that we do not deem valid. One common thing we've been seeing for some students, the parents live abroad. They get like a foreign notarized letter saying that they're giving guardianship to such and such relative who lives in New York City with their child, with their with the parents, the foreign parent's child lives in New York with a relative. If a student lives in New York State and they've been living in New York State, then the only proof of legal guardianship would be a New York State family court order that shows legal guardianship is being approved because the student is under the jurisdiction of the New York State Family Court if they're a New York resident. So no foreign document is going to be able to approve a legal guardianship for that minor if the minor lives in New York State and is under the authority of the New York State Family Court system. So, again, we're seeing some colleges accepting some types of documentation that do not pass scrutiny. And if we do see that, we'll let the student or college know that this documentation is not accepted and doesn't meet our qualifications. But it would be something, again, we'll talk about uploads later, that they can provide as an upload. If the student has indicated to us through the prior questions that they're really a dependent student, then the application will transition to requesting parent information. And in that sense, you'll see that the application will flag, it'll say, parent info is now required. So the subsequent screens you're going to be seeing are asking questions about your parents. First thing we're going to start is parent marital status because we need to know, right, are we looking at a single or two-parent household type of situation? Some parent marital status, such as married or separated, divorced, or widowed, would require an accompanying date as to when that status began. Now, why do we need the date? Because we need to know whether or not an income adjustment might be in play if it was a recent divorce or separation. We might need to know, if it's a deceased parent, again, another income adjustment situation. If a parent filed jointly with a deceased parent in tax year 2023, they indicate to us that a parent became widowed in, May of 2024, our system will know, hey, we have a student who has a deceased parent, and we may need to adjust their income based on parents filing jointly in 2023 and a parent being recently deceased. So, and then there's also a question about parents living in New York State. Again, students need to really be careful when they're tabbing through or clicking through that they're answering the questions accordingly because we, again, see some unnecessary residency reviews where a student by accident put no to parents living in New York State and that flagged them for residency review and they have to go through the whole questionnaire process. The next screen will ask whether or not their parent or parents filed a 2023 New York State tax return. And there's going to be three options to indicate whether they did, with the first one being they will not file a New York State tax return for the 2023 tax year. They filed an IT-201, which is a full year resident New York State tax return, or they filed an IT-203 non-resident tax return. Also important when students are answering questions that they have the right information in front of them and they're not guessing. We have some students that will guess IT-203 when it's really an IT-201. If you guess an IT-203, that's going to select you for a residency review. So we do have some instances where by accident the student selects IT-203, flags them for a residency review because they're telling us their parent filed a non-resident return. So we do want to make sure that they're answering these questions correctly. Students can always save the app if they don't have their parents' tax documents. They're not sure. They can save. There's a 24-hour save period. They could come back and they could resume the application once they get the right documents and know what type of tax return their parent filed. If the parent is a non-filer, the application will present them, the question, did you file New York State taxes? They'll say will not. Did the parent file a federal tax return? They'll say will not. And then they get this unreported income screen. The unreported income screen gives the parent the opportunity to enter any of their untaxed income earned in 2023, or if they claim to not have any untaxed income, they could just hit continue. So again, if a parent, only worked a small amount, didn't earn enough to have to file, they would just, indicate their little bit of earnings there. Number of people in the household dependent on the parents, not the parents, but who's dependent on the parents. And then we'll put them through as a non-filer with untaxed income in the amount that they list. Again, if that doesn't apply to them, they could just hit the continue button to say no, there's no unreported income earned. Now, if they are a tax filer, then they would indicate their information needed for us to verify them. So they're going to be putting what type of tax return they filed for filing status, had a household, single if they're a single parent, The application will only ask for one parent's information if by marital status they presented to us that it is a single parent household. So again, I said my parent is widowed, separated, divorced, never married. Then I'll only see this one parent one info section being filled out. And we would typically expect a single parent type of tax return, right? Head of household or single. If they are a two-parent household, then the application will ask for both parents' information. We would expect joint or separately filed tax returns. When students are entering the information for their parents, we just need two things. We need their social security number or tax ID number and the last name. If the parent, well, all parents should at least have a last name, but if they don't have a social or tax ID number, they could check the box, which will blank out the social or tax ID number, and then a request will be sent to the student later for a verification form that asks them to verify if their parent does not have a social security number or tax ID number. We welcome and accept the use of tax ID numbers because, again, if a parent files taxes, they use an ITIN. That will help us verify their income. And a lot of the people who apply with us do provide their ITINs, and we use it with tax and finance. We verify income, and it works out just fine. So, again, if parents do file taxes, they should be reporting, and that's what the red message says at the top. If they say they file taxes, then they should be giving us at least a social or ITIN. We do get some people that will indicate their parents file taxes and then say their parent does not have a social or ITIN, which we won't accept because if you file taxes, then how did you do so without a social security number or ITIN? Again, if they file taxes, we'll be looking for their taxable income. If they said federal only, this would be for AGI. For our IT 201, IT 203 filers, it's line 37, so it's going to be their New York State taxable income. So they're going to look at that. And with our income ranges now, the TAP income eligibility for New York State taxable income for dependent students and independent students with children or tax dependents can go up to 125,000, which has increased the number of applications we have, the number of awards we're giving, because right now a wide variety of families of varying incomes are now able to apply for TAP given the increase in the TAP income eligibility threshold. So it used to be 80,000, but now it goes up to 125,000 New York State net taxable income. Again, it's not federal AGI. You can have a parent with 130,000 federal AGI that when they do their New York taxes, because of New York deductions, can have a New York taxable income below equal or below to 125. So, like again, we are getting more and more people applying for TAP. And our minimum award for those applicants have increased from 500 to 1,000 per year. So if I make $124,000 per year, I could get $1,000 in TAP for my child to help them pay for their college. If it's a single parent who's indicated divorce separated, the application, in addition to asking for the parent's New York State taxable income, would also ask for child support. This would ask for only the support provided to the student, not the support provided for other siblings in the household. And this would be for the 2023 tax year. So if there's a divorce separated parent situation, they did receive child support from the non-custodial parent in 2023. That's supposed to be entered on this screen. We get a lot of questions from school counselors, students, and our college partners about income adjustments. If there's a special circumstance pertaining to income, can we make adjustments to the income that a parent made in tax year 2023 if their future earnings or even 2024 tax return shows that they're making a lot less than what they made in 2020 in tax year 2023? The first thing to know is tax year 2023 is required. So even if the student's filing a TAP application some point next year after they or their parent has filed a 24 return, we're still going to be asking for and verifying income based on tax year 2023. If there's a special circumstance as to why income is changing or has changed, there are certain circumstances that we will look at and potentially result in an income review and adjustment for that student. Those following circumstances are divorce or legal separation of parents, resulting, of course, in change in income, death of a wage earning parent, total and permanent disability of a wage earning parent. So again, if parents got recently divorced, they filed jointly in 2023, now the income situation is differently, then we would ask for, proof of divorce or legal separation, a copy of the tax returns, proof of separate address, and we would do that review. If my parent got injured, now they're permanently totally disabled, they get a medical letter from their doctor. This parent is permanently disabled, they're no longer able to work. Same thing, we'd look at tax returns, we'd make an adjustment. We do not make income adjustments for circumstances outside of what you see here. Job loss, unemployment compensation, one-time earnings, somebody got a gambling winning or they sold a house, there's some kind of capital gains. For the federal aid purposes through professional judgment, there's sort of a wide variety of circumstances that colleges can adjust income for, which those rules do not, correspond to what we can adjust income for New York State. So if you're helping a family and they're dealing with a job loss situation where they recently lost their job and they're not making what they made in 2023, unfortunately, we would not adjust for that job loss. But in future years, when they reapply, when the tax returns are in line with our income eligibility requirements, they may become eligible for an award. So our application will ask if parents are permanently disabled. If yes, they enter the date. Again, that prompts us to do that, income adjustment review if they're saying their parent is totally permanently disabled. And then we transition to student information. So again, we have this call out screen that says, now you're transitioning to providing us from parent info back to student info. And everything you're going to see here is related to student income, student information. So the first thing we ask is, did the student file a New York State tax return? Again, same three options: will not file, IT 201, IT 203. Students really need to avoid double reporting their parents' tax information in the student income section of the TAP application. This is kind of the oldest error that we've seen for many, many years, and it's a tried and true error because people still do it every year. Where, again, they're asking about taxes. So either the student or parent who's filling this out will repeat the parent's tax information, which will increase the application income by 2, right? If I put my parent made 124,000 in the parent section, and then I'm going to put it again for the student section, well, that's going to then make it look like we make 228,000, and I'm not going to qualify for TAP. Again, students can make corrections and fix these kind of errors. We'll talk about corrections in a moment, but they should really avoid the errors in the first place by carefully reading and answering the questions presented to them. So this would be the experience if the student was a tax filer. Similar to the parent, they'd indicate they filed, indicate their tax filing status, and indicate their line 37 taxable income. If they're a non-filer, similar to the parent's experience, they indicate they didn't file a state, didn't file a federal return, and then provide any untaxed income if they have earned any untaxed income in tax year 2023. Final question here before we go into signatures is, does the student have other family members attending college full-time in the 2025-2026 school year? Again, a lot of errors are made here. We have students who will literally say yes, and then for family members, they list their entire family will be going to college next year, or in this case, the entire starting roster and coaching staff of the New York Knicks. So this would only be if the student has a brother, sister, or other family member, like a parent, who's also going to college full-time in the 2025-26 school year at the same time as them. If not, they would simply say no and they would skip and they would move forward. But if yes, if they have like an older sibling, they're in college, they're going to be in college next year, then they would indicate that, provide their information. And we do verify this through a sibling enrollment, a family member enrollment verification process. So now we're on signatures. If I'm a dependent student, I have to provide a parent signature. If I have a single parent, it would only be one parent that I'm providing. If I have married parents who file jointly, then I only need to provide the signature of one of the two parents. To sign the application, I have two options. I can e-sign as a parent, or I can sign on paper. If I choose to e-sign, the instructions say that if you try to e-sign, you need to have identity verified by having a New York State DMV issued ID, driver's license, learner's permit, non-driver's license. And so we'll go in there and a pop-up window would show up, and my parent then is going to enter their driver's license information, their date of birth, and sign their name, and then it could match to the DMV's records. Parents must have a DMV issued credential to do this. In New York State, for a few years now, we've had the green light law where where people of all different immigration statuses can apply for driver's licenses. But if a parent doesn't happen to have one, it doesn't mean they need to apply for one. They could just simply choose to sign on paper. This system does have some errors sometimes where the information provided doesn't match the DMV records. They'll get some red error messages. In that case, we would ask them to use the paper signature option. Paper signatures would be downloaded. They pop up as a separate pop-up window, a PDF that could be saved, printed at home, or if student doesn't have a printer at home, hopefully there's printers at school where they can work with their school counselor or college advisor to print the page at school. The pages can then be signed and then could be returned to us either by mail, the address is on the form, or via upload, which is our preferred process. Uploads will not be available for applications until after they've been processed. So you cannot immediately upload documentation to us the moment after you hit the submit button on a TAP application. Why? Because we haven't processed the application. We don't know what information is missing. So we get people who will try to send us proof of independence documentation, signatures, this and that immediately after submitting a TAP application. And they tell us, we have to email this to you because there's no upload option. Well, of course, there's no upload option because we didn't ask you for documentation yet. We don't know what's missing. We didn't know your parent didn't sign. We don't know that until the application has been processed. So please hold off on transmitting documents to us until the application has been processed with the request for documentation. Because sometimes we get people who will e-sign, print the paper, and we get a paper, we don't even need it because they already e-signed. So definitely please hold off until there's a request. Whether it's been e-signed or paper signed, there'll be an approved, parent signature status indicating that the signature section is complete, and then they go into the review and submit area. Student will review their questions and answers. If they need to make a change, they can click modify or answer. If everything looks good, at the bottom there's a submit button. The student will then agree to the terms and condition again that the authorized HESC and our partner agencies to verify the information provided, including income and all that other information. And so the student agrees to our terms and conditions. They don't need an ID to sign. They just need to check, they affirm, they agree to the terms and conditions, and then type their name and then hit submit. They hit submit, they get a congratulations button, and usually the application will process within the next 3 to 5 business days. Again, successful application processing is going to be contingent on whether or not that FAFSA has been processed. Do we have a FAFSA for the student? Was it processed with an SAI? And then, of course, as I've mentioned ad nauseum today, does the identity on the TAP application match the identity that the student provided on their FAFSA? So what's next? So there's some account maintenance steps that the students can take, including checking their application status. They go to hes.ny.gov. In the top right, there's a student account sign-in call-out button, and with a number of different account maintenance options. They can check their award status, provide missing information, update their college, change their contact information, a lot of self-service options here. When they're reviewing and they're in their portal, they can navigate. If they're a continuing student, there might be multiple aid years that they can navigate. In this case, we're looking at 25-26. They could click into the details of their application to see the status. In this case, the student's clicking into their details of their 25-26 TAP application, and they can see there that they're missing parent signature. So the application instructions say you want to provide it, click the review, update your TAP information button. They're brought to that similar looking screen, the review and modify screen. And at the top, there'll be links to provide whatever missing information is needed. So in this case, we're missing parent one's signature. They click review update. There's a red link. Click here to supply the missing signature. They'll be brought to that same screen we saw earlier where they can either e-sign as a parent, they can paper sign. When they make changes and modifications, if they sign electronically, for example, they need to make sure that they go down to the bottom of this submission screen and submit their changes. They'll be asked to sign the student's name to agree to the changes, and then they'll get a confirmation of their changes. If I'm just going here, clicking submit parent signature, e-sign, and then I close out the browser without submitting those changes, we'll never get the e-signature of the parent. Now, following up, students could follow up with us to do document uploads. I mentioned before, application's been processed. They get an email from us, you're missing information, log into your account. They log in, and it says you're missing parent signature. They opt to do the paper So with the paper signature page, once they've done that, if the upload option's available, they'll see the upload link, or they could just navigate to our upload portal, and then they can upload their signature page or whatever other documentation to us. Again, we're looking for valid documents. We get a lot of questions from students. Oh, I submitted my document 5 times. We get a lot of different things they submit to us, files that we can't read, in invalid formats. People will take like an iPhone image of their parent signature, try to upload that, and we can't read those HEIC files or other things like that. Sometimes we get blank signature pages. They just download the signature page, upload it back to us without a signature. So, if they're providing us an invalid document, it may be why their status is not being updated. They can see their upload history, and that for us will help us also track when they submitted a document. We could see when it was uploaded, and we could try to track it down to review or audit as needed. Changing college names is very, very easy. If I don't want to go to Columbia University and I use that update college information button, I could easily change my college from Columbia. In this case, we're doing Hunter College. I don't have to go through the whole, modify my information, go back into my full TAP application. There's a standalone function just to update my college without having to go through all those different screens. So I know it's a lot of information condensed into 1 hour. Again, you can see why we didn't do the DREAM Act because that would just have pushed us way beyond the hour. But I'm happy at this point to answer any questions. I know we'll probably go into general Q&A at this point to cover this. And again, we're going to provide a copy of the slideshow that you just saw with the application screens will be posted on the NYSFAAA site.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mike. So there are a handful of questions that are specific to your presentation, and then there's some generic FAFSA ones left over. So we're going to start with the TAP ones first. Is the data from the 25-26 FAFSA auto coming into the 25-26 TAP application?
So no, there is no, unfortunately, because of the change in what they call the API, there's until the feds bring that process back, there is no pre-population of data. So it's super important that, again, the student correctly enter their own data when doing the TAP application.
Thanks.
Mike, could I just add to that? Because several questions came up on that same topic while you were talking and even before you were talking. Because one question said, was asking about the API, but the student does get an email from HESC. They actually get two that tells them, hey, we have your FAFSA form. Here's a link to complete your TAP application. And if they do it that way, it there's less there's less error that way because then the information from the FAFSA is pre-populated, but HESC is doing it for the student from the FAFSA data. So even though it's not on there, when the student clicks on it, they can get the TAP application pre-filled if they wait until they get the email from HESC.
Correct. Yep. So if they've already filed, again, like these folks who are in beta 1, beta 2, and we've got an ICER for them, we've been collecting ICERs since they started the first beta where we got New York data. Yes, they'll get requests to file the TAP app, and they will have pre-populated applications based on the pre-receipt of an ICER. But if they just filed their FAFSA and now they're going on and doing their TAP, if that FAFSA, of course, is not yet processed because they just literally did it, then they'll be responsible for filling in their information without the pre-fill.
Thanks. Though it's not required, the New York State ID number, is it still like preferable? Does it help confirm residency faster or something?
It helps confirm identity. Again, residency is really contingent on the answers to the questions on the TAP app that we walk through. So even if I provide my New York State ID and then I later go on to say my parents don't live in New York, I'm going to get selected for a residency review. It's more likely, it's more usable for identity verification on the HESC PIN account to validate the account as opposed to verify residency.
Excellent. When students are asked to submit documents to HESC, what's the time frame for a response to the student?
So it depends. Some documentation is very easy for us to process and review and clear, and other documentation requires more qualitative review, more in-depth review. So signature pages are typically things that are turned over very quickly if we get a valid one. Again, we get many invalid signature pages. Citizenship documentation, again, if it's pretty straightforward, it's a US passport, certificate of naturalization. We turn those over pretty fast. Residency reviews can take a little bit longer because, again, we're reviewing questionnaires. We're kind of going through it as a reviewer and scrutinizing that. And income adjustments can take a really long time because of going back and forth with students. We get taxes, but we need W-2s. We get taxes, but we need schedules. We need proof of this. We need proof of that. So that can take a lot longer. So it's really relative to the type of document we're getting.
Thank you. Does TAP or the DREAM Act provide aid for trade schools?
So, any schools that are eligible for New York State aid, it would be determined by the New York State Education Department. There's something called the Inventory of Registered Programs, where schools that have approved degree or certificate programs can see whether or not they're eligible for TAP or Veterans Tuition Assistance, for example. Some trade schools may be eligible only for Veterans Tuition Assistance because that program does have more permissions for purely trade programs, but they may not be that same school, that same program may not be eligible for TAP. So if a particular school is wondering, is my certificate or degree program eligible for TAP? Go on Google search the New York State Education Department inventory of registered programs, look up your school's programs, and then in the details of those programs, there'll be flags that will show, is it eligible for TAP? Yes or no? Is it eligible for this? Is it eligible for that?
Thanks. What's a typical time frame to complete a residency review once a questionnaire has been filled out?
I've already answered that, so you can go forward.
Let's see. Residency for dependent students is based on a parent's residency. If a dependent student has lived in New York State for 1 year, but their parent haven't, is that when they apply for the Jose Peralta?
So again, we didn't talk about the DREAM Act today. There are some permissions for non-resident students to qualify through the DREAM Act. In that type of scenario, perhaps, depending on the other eligibility criteria that the student may have. But that would be a question to save for when we do some training and presentations on the DREAM Act.
Awesome. Will TAP honor J Treaty students as eligible non-citizens?
So we follow the same exact Title IV eligibility criteria. So when my team is reviewing citizenship documentation, they're trained using the Federal Student Aid Handbook. So if the Federal Student Aid Handbook says they're eligible, J Treaty is in the handbook, then yes, they're eligible. We just need the tribal card, birth certificate, the documentation laid out in the handbook.
And I
Okay.
just will add to that, Danielle, they need to reside on the New York State tribe, not on the Canadian tribe. That's the one thing that the handbook just says that they're eligible for federal aid, but for New York State, they need to be on the New York State side.
Thank you. Thank you. How long does income verification take for processing?
So we run income verification cycles 4 times weekly. So, you know, 12 times monthly, um, 16 times monthly. So typically pretty quickly if they clear. If the student's application is not clearing, like it's been a week, 2 weeks, then it means that there's an issue. And so students will get an email notification from us when every time income verification fails, saying that, New York State can't verify you or your parents' income. It tells them to log into their account and it tells them to review their application for potential errors that may be causing income verification to fail. Commonly, it could be a student or parent saying they filed a return when they really didn't. It could also be a mismatch of last names for students or parents. They file a tax return under a different last name than what they provided us on the application. Or it could be a bad social security or tax ID number for a parent, where that's the reason why it's not matching. So typically 9 out of 10 times an application correction resolves income verification. We would only really want to receive documentation to fix income verification if there's been already an attempt to fix the application. A lot of times schools and other partners are sending us documentation before the application was even reviewed. And all we do is we get that doc, we see we have a bad social, we fix the social, which is something that the student could have done if they had just taken the time to review their account. If we are asking for documentation to verify income, it has to be transcripts. We do not accept personal copies of tax returns. We don't accept IT 201 personal copies. Why? Because if they filed it, we should have verified it. So every time we get an IT 201, we check with tax and finance. They tell us this copy was never filed. We never got it. So that's why we only work with transcripts. You could also get a certified copy of your New York State IT 201. So if you go on Google and you Google New York State tax and finance, copy of my return, there's a whole page. They fill out a DTF form and they can get an official certified copy. Again, they really don't need to do that because if they can get a certified copy of their return, typically we've already cleared them through income verification, or there's just some kind of simple error on the TAP app that was never fixed.
Great. Are residency questionnaires required if a student attended and graduated from a New York State high school and the student has a New York State ID and so does the parents?
Again, income reviews are based on answers to the TAP application. So you could have you
Residency. Sorry, residency review.
residency, yeah, residency reviews are based on answers to TAP application. I'm New York City third generation. My grandma was born here, my mom was born here, I was born here. But if I fill out that TAP application today and say my mom doesn't live in New York, I'm getting flagged for a residency review. No matter what documentation we have, what high school I went to, my mom went to, my grandma went to, doesn't matter. It's how I answer the application.
Excellent. Will HESC ever consider having New York State income data transfer like FAFSA does from the state aid application?
We do already. That's our income verification process. So we don't have so right now, we don't have that process where so to clarify, similar to the IRS DDX, which didn't exist before last year, the IRS DDX now, everybody goes through retrieval, regardless of whether the parent or student wants to, right? Before, when we had the IRS option, it was optional where you could just skip the IRS data retrieval process. Now everyone goes through the IRS screening. That process has already existed for TAP for years and years and years. No matter what they tell us, I filed taxes, I didn't file taxes, this is my income, that's my income. We bring them through New York State income verification with tax and finance. So that process already exists. But we do ask for income because we need an income figure to give them an estimate. So we don't just let them fill out the app and then, leave income blank and then tell us, oh, we filed a tax return. Because if income verification never completes, we won't be able to offer them an estimate of their award.
Excellent. The remaining questions are kind of a mixture of FAFSA and TAP. So some of them might be for Renee, some might be for Mike. One question, though, that I will answer for you both is, will the question and answers be available with the recording? So like the physical typed answers that you've submitted that we're answering in the background, they will not be available, but the ones that are answered live will obviously be in the recording. Okay. So first question. It's not really a question, it's more of a statement, really. It's important to stress that all contributors need to wait a number of days for their studentaid.gov accounts to be verified before they begin working on the form. There was a lot of problems with that last year, and yeah, so I guess it's more of a statement. Make sure that you wait after you've completed your application for your FSA ID for your account before you actually file your FAFSA. Okay, actual question. This one has a question mark in it. What should you do when the contributor invites don't go through? We've noticed it happen often recently.
I mean, I know it's usually an email error, right? So we used to get that question a lot in our virtual workshops that we did a lot of them last year. And a lot of times we got that feedback, oh, my contributor didn't get their invite. And then when we have the student log back in to their FAFSA, it was a mistype on the parent email, something of that nature where it just needed to be rekeyed in and resent. That was the majority of the fixes that we did. So if they're not getting a contributor request, it could be just a bad email address.
Agreed. And there also is an opportunity to resend the invitation link. So sometimes, the FAFSA site does get overwhelmed, even under the best of circumstances. Even prior to the overhaul of the application, the site would get overwhelmed. And, technology is not perfect. So maybe at the time when the invitation was sent to the parent or parent, more than one parent contributor, that there might have been a system burp or something. So we want to just stress maybe resending the application and confirming, like Mike said, that the email is correct to hopefully get that invitation sent through to the contributors.
Yes, and for students that were in beta 1 and beta 2, there actually is a known error on the contributor invite emails. So give it a little bit and then go ahead and try to resubmit to have those contributor emails sent.
Yeah, I will add that we had several questions just like this, but some of them were for parents who live in a foreign country that they were not getting the contributor invite. So I know I had seen a couple, but I didn't know what the resolution was.
I think those ones fall in that beta issue. There is a known issue, and they're supposed to be releasing a patch for that on December 9th. So
Okay.
details to follow.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let's see. How long do parents have to complete their FAFSA once they have their invitation?
The messaging looks like it is still there that contributors have that 45-day window. That messaging is still there. So it's, obviously to the students' advantage where possible, to gently encourage their parent contributors to complete the application or their portion of the application as soon as possible, so that the application is not disabled and then have to restart again. So it looks like that 45-day window is still in process for 25-26.
Thank you. What's the typical time frame to complete a residency review once a questionnaire has been filled out for New York State TAP application?
Review times vary. Again, I kind of answered this before. Residency reviews are not done by robots or AI, maybe one day in the near future. But right now, they're done by human beings, and we process them for the whole state. So sometimes we have schools that have a student they're really interested in getting a registration hold removed for, who just sent in their residency questionnaire yesterday. But we are, processing the 500 that we received within the past 2 weeks. So review times are going to vary.
Lovely. What would be some reasons for why a valid New York State driver's license does not work for the e-signature um and we put it in right?
Yep. So the match is dependent on matching to the information on the New York State DMV side, their computers, their database, right? The first thing I usually tell the student when we troubleshoot this situation is let's first go back to the parent section to make sure you gave the right parent info, because that's also being used as part of the data transfer. So if I put a wrong parent social, for example, in that prior section, then that might be the cause for the mismatch. Other times we look at it, everything looks like it matches. It matches on the application, but then you still get the red messages. It's not matching. Um, Technology is not infallible, so again, if it's just not working, then we can go to the paper signature, which is why we offer both options.
Thank you. For I believe this is for when you request documentation on the HESC side. What is the preferred type of format for uploads? And is this like listed on the website when a student goes to upload their information?
We take all different types of uploads, PDFs, JPEG image files, as long as we can open it. We typically do not accept the HEIC iPhone image files. So that's something that because we're not using Mac-based systems and everything's Windows-based. So sometimes that could be an issue why we can't get an upload. But generally speaking, we get, majority of what they send us. They also need to make sure that they send us the right documents because we do get students, final term papers and all sorts of other random documents that are in their folders that they accidentally click to upload instead of their signature pages or whatever they're trying to actually send us. So that's important too.
Thank you. Are there any upcoming TAP processing trainings aimed specifically at financial aid counselors?
I just did one 2 weeks ago. We did a full TAP eligibility and certification webinar, 2 hours. That recording can be found under the financial aid, academic partners area, financial aid administrators. There's a resources and training and webinar section. We have recording on that. We did a recording on part-time TAP certification. We did a training on consolidated roster certification. We did a recording on the Excelsior Scholarship certification. So we've been doing a lot of training lately. So if you missed something, just go to that training and webinars area on HESC Web and you'll find it.
Can I also add on that? I think you mentioned it, Mike, in the beginning part of your session about signing up for the bulletins from the HESC website. Those bulletins are not just about financial aid processing, they're also announcing upcoming trainings and things. So we want to make sure that you have access to those items when they do become available. And Michael looks like he's going to demonstrate how to do that for you.
Yep. So yeah, I was just going to show what it looks like on our end. Although Zoom is not being my friend. Let's see. You can proceed to the next question. I'll start pulling this stuff up.
Okay. So what if the parent lives in another state but student lives in New York? Can they still be eligible for TAP?
Potentially through the New York State Dream Act with the provisions for non-residents, but that would be something we talk about when we do some Dream Act training. But there is a lot of info on our site about the Dream Act and that sort of situation.
If parents are legally separated or divorced, do they both have to sign the TAP application?
Um, Only if they're both providing their information because of a joint tax filing, right? So if I say my parents were divorced or separated last week, meaning that they filed either the 22 or 23, depending on what year they're applying for, tax return jointly, then yes, then I need signatures for both of those parents.
This question, I'm not sure what it was in reference to. It might have been a specific thing that you were talking about at the time, but do parents and students get error emails?
Yes, anytime there's a change or issue on a student account, there are emails that pop up that will show the student that it's very vanilla. So we don't know who's getting the email, who's reading emails. So we don't go into specific details and say, hey, your TAP award for this amount is subject to review for income verification or this, that, or the other thing. We just simply say there's an issue with your account. Here's the link. Please sign in, check your status.
And I
Uh,
think that's also very similar on the FAFSA side of things. Like if a student has submitted their application, they know that they've done their section and the parent has done their section, and they haven't gotten anything either from the school or there just seems to be a delay. Then the student can log onto their studentaid.gov account or into their account using their studentaid.gov username and password and seeing if there's anything under the My Activity section that would be preventing their application from being processed. So that would be another fail-safe on the federal side of things for them to kind of keep monitoring the status of their FAFSA.
And
So I don't
just
know if
to
you've
add to
seen.
Renee, what Renee and Mike have said, so in most situations, parents are not notified when a student is missing information on their application. Usually it's the student gets the email notification, not necessarily the parent. There's very few instances where a parent is notified due to the Privacy Act.
So I don't
Great
know if you
point.
guys can you see my screen share with the
yes.
Yes.
okay, perfect. So this is the financial aid again, for academic partners, financial aid professionals, right? So if I want to sign up for HESC updates, we get a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm not getting the emails from HESC." Bottom of this page, you can sign up to get our newsletters for financial aid professionals. In that same area, financial aid professionals, if you go under resources, there is a trainings and webinar section where you could see any of the recordings of previous webinars we just did, including most recently the TAP certification and eligibility 2-hour webinar that I did.
Brilliant. And that actually answers the next question. Someone was saying that they're only seeing events for students and families. When are their sessions for counselors? So just check out that financial aid professionals section right at the top of the HESC page underneath
And so,
academic partners.
and Danielle, I would just like to encourage the counselors that may be left on the recording that um, training is offered throughout, but information is sent to people who have signed up to get information from HESC. So sign up to receive the information so that you're informed of when training and webinars are held.
Um, This one is I have a student who recently left home. To their knowledge, they're not flagged as McKinney-Vento yet, and they were claimed on their parents' taxes. For dependency test, they would likely still qualify as dependent. How should they file?
So I mean, it sounds like I would need more information, or we would need more information. If it is, a situation where a student either left the home or was removed from the home because of abuse, neglect, things of that nature, then they would answer the I have an unusual circumstance on the FAFSA and be considered a provisionally independent student. And kind of go through that process with the college or university to collect the supporting documentation. It may end up being a dependency override situation. So these situations, very much like Mike was mentioning with some TAP situations, are not cut and dried. They are reviewed individually based on the student's specific circumstances. So they may be, for all intents and purposes, a dependent student on the FAFSA. However, they do have a unique, unusual circumstance that the college or university could then deem the student an independent and perform that dependency override. But there are so many nuances with these situations that it would probably be best served at the institutional college or university level to kind of ask more questions to see what route we're going down in terms of, is it really a dependent student, or is it going to be a dependency override situation to make them independent?
Thank you. We're going through our last few questions. We're going to try to wrap up at 12:30. So let's see. If parents are married for TAP purposes, but one parent lives in a foreign country and the other parent lives in New York State, are they going to get flagged for residency?
Depends on how they answer the TAP application, which has been the theme of my answer to the similar questions we've gotten today.
It's always the financial aid answer. Well, it depends. Okay. A contributor need not have the email from US DOE per se. This is not a question. Moving on. Are there trainings on ASAP, SEEK, CD, and HEOP, EOP for counselors?
That's a wonderful question that should be brought to SUNY CUNY Central Administration. Those those are school-based programs. I mean, they're not administered by HESC, they're administered by the State Education Department. But typically I know that the offices at the HEOP offices, the EOP CCD offices would probably do something if counselors are asking for it. But you need to ask like your partners in the CUNY and SUNY admissions offices, because it would be those institutions that would have to host that, not HESC.
On the traditional TAP application, students have the choice of checking citizen or permanent resident. What would you check if the student was a VAWA student, victims of human trafficking and women something? I can't remember what VAWA stands for.
Yep.
Women,
Yeah,
yeah.
according to the handbook, VAWA is an eligible non-citizen status if they have a prima facie determination. So they would put eligible non-citizen.
Excellent. And VAWA stands for Violence Against Women Act. Um, for these ones are kind of school specific, so I'm gonna skip those. We have major issues trying to help students find out what errors are preventing their applications from processing. It would be helpful for us to be able to access more information on the HASC application. Is this a thing?
On HESC Web, we tell schools pretty much everything you need to know about what's wrong with the TAP application. There's flags that tell you if income verification's been completed. There's messages that you see the same exact messages when we looked at the student account screens before said parent one signature is missing. You'd see the same exact thing on HESC Web. So I would really advise that schools utilize the access that we currently provide them. And if they have some suggestions about additional information they'd like to see on HESC Web, they could definitely reach out to us at Priority Services with those suggestions to see how we can better display information for them.
Like, I think this question is coming from a school counselor, not necessarily a financial aid
Uh,
counselor
Yeah,
at a college.
unfortunately, yeah, we don't have that same level of access for high school counselors themselves because of federal privacy laws. I mean, the best thing a lot of times when I have school counselors reaching out saying, okay, what's wrong with the student's application? The first thing I say is, well, have you helped the student log in their account to see their status? Like, we're so interested in helping the students take care of the problem right away, but we're not teaching them how to fish, so to speak. As I say with my own kids, it's like, they're going to be on their own in college and they got to do TAP every year. So if you're hand holding them through the entire process and just using your connections to get something resolved without teaching them how to log into their account, see their status, upload a document, then you may be doing them more of a disservice, by not, showing them what they can do. So I would, again, that's why we showed you as part of our presentation, the account screens and stuff that students can access. So if you're helping students, maybe you should have a workshop on helping them navigate their accounts and see how to do follow up and triage their statuses.
Brilliant. And the last two questions for today. How long does it take for a roster to be processed after the application is submitted? The student is registered for 12 credits.
So that is a multi-layered question. The first question is are they on a roster? Second question is if they're on a roster, have they been certified? Then the third question is if they have been certified, what date were they certified? And then the fourth question is if they were certified, did they land in our errors? So for that specific person asking, if there's a specific case that they're curious about, they can contact us at Priority Services. We'll be happy to assist.
Thank you. And will there be a separate counselor training for the Dream Act? She's only seeing events for families on the website. Will there be any events during the day for counselors?
Yep, we're planning on doing a whole sort of FAFSA, Dream Act, all these different modules for school counselors. So all of that's coming very soon. Our communications team, they have a whole great project planned out for school counselors. So please make sure you sign up to our school counselor letter. There are a lot of wonderful things coming down the pipeline for FAFSA, Dream Act training, student support. So sign up for the newsletter.
Awesome. And that was our last question. Woot woot. So I want to thank all of our presenters and our panelists, as well as the statewide training committee, for allowing us to have this training and being amazing presenters. And thank you everyone for joining us. I should turn my camera on. Good call. Um, I want everyone to be safe. Thank you for joining us. Be well and sending love from NYSFAAA your way. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye.